Hey, my name is Matt Storr and I repair saxophones for a living, and today I would like to talk to you about the Conn-O-Sax. Conn-O-Sax. This was an instrument made in the key of F by the Conn Corporation, CG Conn Ltd., in 1928 through 1930. We don't know how many were made, but we know not many existed. Somewhere between 30 and 40, I think, are accounted for today. It used to be more like 20 something, but in the past few years, a few more of them popped up, including this one, which I overhauled about a year ago. This was made in 1928 in the key of F, keyed to high G, and down to low A. So it's got one of the largest keyed ranges of any saxophone ever made, and in the key of F, and it's got this unusual bell, which don't know exactly what's going on with it. It probably has to do with both decorative and also sort of for the propagation of the sound and the unique timbre of this instrument. And this is really cool. On this bell, these holes in the edges here are rolled. So they rolled the tone holes on this bell, including this giant one at the bottom. That's not like a ring that's been soldered on. It's actually rolled over from the inside. So that's really cool. And this bell was made in two pieces. You can kind of see the seam on the inside there. And then, so they brazed it together, soldered these over the seam, pulled these tone holes and rolled it. Just absolutely nuts. It's really cool that they did that. So yeah, this was made in 1928, developed a little bit before that during the, roaring 20s, when saxophone novelty acts were kind of all the rage. Virtuosity, that is like people sort of, playing stuff that was just like virtuoso displays of technical prowess. It was really hot back then. And people like Rudy Whiteoff were doing things in the saxophone no one thought were possible. Instruments were being made with extra keys, so people could play like these sort of stars that they were used to seeing and hearing on records, radio, and live. And the Conn-O-Sax was marketed as a novelty instrument. Now, when we think of the word novelty now, it's kind of, we think of it as like a cheapened type of deal, but novelty back then was more about like, when people went to go see a musical performance, they wanted to see something new, they wanted to see something amazing, and this was a new instrument that, by virtue of its extra key work and its strange look, people could, if they were virtuoso musicians anyways, they could play some really amazing stuff on this that sounded and looked a little bit different than what people were used to. And that was the idea. And when you read ads about this, and one of the ones I've seen actually says, like, the people sponsoring this, people sponsored by Conn that's playing this instrument, was described as one of the, top blackface comedians. So that gives you an idea of, the kind of audiences that an instrument like this would have been playing for back then. Unfortunately, it was developed right into the Great Depression, and not a lot of people bought them. And most of them were consigned to practice fodder at the Conn repair school, like the F-Mezzo. The F-Mezzo, which I've done another video on, go ahead and stay there, I'll show you, is also a saxophone made by Conn in the key of F, but it is more of a normal saxophone, keyed in the normal range, has the normal shape. It's just in the key of F. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, I've got one of these in the garage. Can I swap necks? Yes, the necks are actually the same. If I lay them next to each other, it's a little bit more obvious. But you can see that, these are the same body tubes and the same necks pretty much. It's just that this one, the Conn-O-Sax, is straight and goes a little bit farther. And I think these are actually really close in serial number as well. Let's see, this is 213 and that's 219. And for comparison, in case you're thinking, well, I think I might have one of these out in the garage, probably you don't have a Conn-O-Sax. You might have a straight alto though. So this is an E-flat alto, which being an E-flat, of course, this one is in green, yours probably isn't. That is the original finish. But just putting them next to each other so you can see. Get my chair out of the way. So, let's see, am I getting the whole thing? One is in the key of F, one is in the key of E-flat, so they're a whole step apart. But the one in the key of F, the Conn-O-Sax, goes down to low A, so they're only a half step apart, which is why the distance, the length differential is not actually that great. But straight alto versus Conn-O-Sax. And they're actually pretty similar in size, like I said, because the one that's a whole step higher is a half step longer. than normal, so it's actually much closer in size than you might expect. Let's get that out of the way. So there's actually been a lot written about the Conn-O-Sax. When I was coming up, there was a publication called Saxophone Journal, which there was an article called Vintage Saxophones Revisited, written by Paul Cohen. And that's actually one of the first places I sort of read about vintage saxophones. And the Conn-O-Sax figured large in the sort of, legend of vintage saxophones, being one of the weirdest and the most rare. So that's actually the first place I heard about this. And I think that's probably where most people have heard about it, which is why usually when I talk to people these days, it's younger folks that have never heard of the Conn-O-Sax, probably because Saxophone Journal isn't published anymore. But there's actually been a lot written about it, so I'll link to that down below, because there's proper saxophone historians that can tell you a little bit more about it than I can. Now, as far as repairability, this is basically a normal Conn saxophone with a couple exceptions. The high G, right, which is up here, and is its own key. It's really easy to do. It's really easy to adjust. The low A, which is also its own key and is really easy to adjust. And then the one actually weird thing is that the B and the B flat are on the same rod, and they've got these adjustment screws here that are locking the B flat to the rod, while the B is riding on the rod. So that assembly, and it's actually, let's see, that assembly can come apart by unscrewing these little guys. But that is a very, very long rod inside that key, and if that's bent or dragging, it's going to be pretty obvious in the playing. And you'll see I've got these key heights set up pretty wide down here. That's where the intonation felt okay. It was a little bit weird. Maybe it's because they got the same body tube, but it's just extended, and then it's got this weird bell. The intonation was not exactly like I expected down in the low B, B flat, but still played fine, and just ended up looking a little weird. But as you can see, the pinky table is still set up in a fairly normal way, and the horn plays really, really good. Now, tonally, there will actually be someone that really can play this very well and has a really good recording setup, making a recording for getasax.com, from whence this saxophone comes. And hopefully they'll actually play it next to the F-Mezzo so you can hear the difference. The F-Mezzo, to my ears, sounds a little bit more saxophone-like. They both have a very, very beautiful tone, and I really enjoy playing them. But there you go. That is the Conn-O-Sax on the top there, and the F-Mezzo on the bottom for comparison. Extremely rare vintage saxophone. Really cool, really beautiful, very unique, interesting, fun to play. And you probably won't see too many of them in person. If you get a chance to play one, though, make sure you've got the original mouthpiece. So here's the original mouthpiece is one of these. So it's a little bit smaller than an alto. Or, if you've got one, Brian at Getasax has 3D printed a slightly shrunk down, an appropriately shrunk down Meyer Brothers New York mouthpiece that was scanned, 3D printed, shrunk down to the F size, and it really plays amazing. So if you have a saxophone in the key of F and you would like to play it with a slightly more modern sound, try one of these out. It's really cool. It really, really changes the experience. The original mouthpieces are actually not bad, but this is definitely several steps above. All right, hopefully you found that helpful, useful, and informative. My name is Matt Storr. I repair saxophones for a living. Thanks for watching.